It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Ian Rivers, and Ian, Bemidji State wins in overtime on Friday. They win handily on Saturday. Your Bemidji State Beavers are headed to the Mason Cup semifinals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a little bit of a stressful weekend. I can't lie to you. It was not the way you would have wanted to go about it. Yeah, but we made it through the quarterfinals and we did sweep Ferris State. So that's a very good thing. A very good thing as we dive here into some more men's hockey. It's just great to have men's hockey to talk about this time of year. Obviously, last year I feel like the season was a week ahead of where we are. I
I
could be
feel like we're
wrong, but
behind. I feel like we're behind with
yeah.
everything because, like,
So
even March
like
Madness is like a week late.
yeah, everything is just kind of coming a little later. I don't know if that's actually true, if that's just how I feel, because obviously the warm weather has us thrown off. Not used to playing hockey this temperature, but either way, yeah, Friday night, man. I'm not gonna lie to you, my internet has been absolutely terrible all weekend since Friday, since the time that I would especially want to start using it to stream hockey games. And of course, Friday night I'm out to dinner. My brother's birthday was on Sunday, so we went out on Friday and had birthday dinner with him. And so I'm watching the game on my phone, and then we're getting home, and of course we're transporting ourselves home right as like the end of the game is happening. So I'm in my car. I switch from Flow as I'm getting dropped off at my car to make the last like 6 minutes of the drive home because we met up. And I'm like switching to Beaver Radio Network from Flow so I can listen to it. And then I get back home and I've got to try to get the game back on. But now, of course, my internet won't work. It's chaos. And then all of a sudden, Eric Martin puts in a game tying goal with like 40 seconds left in the game to tie the game up. But yeah, it started off pretty ugly. Austin McCarthy for Ferris State scored 2 goals within basically a minute of each other to go up 2-0. And we're like, all right, there's still plenty of time left, but it was a very, very uninspiring start. 10-3 was the shots in favor of Ferris State at that point, and we're like, are we really about to do this? Like, I know the CCHA has had a lot of parity this year, but let's not be the 8-1 upset. Eric Martin did end up getting one back about 5 minutes after that, and then Dante Lawson scored a goal in the second period about 6 minutes in to tie the game, and we're like, all right, we're back. It's official. We're going to take care of business. And then within a couple of minutes, Ferris State takes another lead off of another just not good defensive play by Carter Jones, I believe it was. And then Andrew Noel puts in another one 7 minutes later. And now panic is starting to set in because it's 4-2 late in the second period. And you're like, oh my God, like this is very realistic that we could lose this game. And there's still obviously you could come back in the series. There's 2 games left, but man, it was panic time. Casper Magnuson adds one on the power play a minute before the end of the second period. And that was a huge relief because if you go into that third period down 2 goals, you never know what could happen, right? Like that's a big ask to come back from 2 goals. That's the hardest lead to protect in hockey is 2 goals, but it still doesn't feel good to have to come back from that. The whole third period, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. They're getting some looks, but they're not like super, super great. And then finally, I think it was Kyle Loaf that just kind of got the puck to the net. Extra attackers on the ice, and it fell very, very kindly to the stick of Eric Martin, who put it in with 40 seconds left and tied it up. And then overtime happens, and of course, it's not 3-on-3 anymore, so it's more real hockey, and you feel pretty good about your chances in that game against Ferris State. And Eric Polkamp puts in a nice, beautiful little tip from Kyle Loaf, threw it in from the blue line, and Polkamp tipped it past. I think Giesbrecht started the first night and did a hell of a celebration. So just a chaotic game overall. I guess a fun one to be a part of at the end of it. But for the first, 55 minutes, and the thing was, it's the perfect encapsulation of what hockey is, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Beavers were terrible for 10 minutes. 10-3 was the shots. I think I looked at the scoreboard, CJ, at one point, and it was 16-10 in shots for the Beavers. So they had
Mhm.
gotten like 13 straight shots before Ferris State even registered another one. And I think they led the shot total in this game. Let's see. Ferris State had 27. Bemidji State had 51. So Bemidji dominated that game, but Giesbrecht stood on his head. That's just hockey. You can double the shots, and luckily you won by a goal, but sometimes you might not even win that game. So lucky to get game one.
Yeah, I mean, game one was I didn't get a chance to watch the game. I had to work at my other job, and I just kind of could follow from afar. And all of a sudden, I saw the score going into the third period, and I thought the same thing you do. It's like, are we really going to do this? Is this really going to happen? Are we really going to give up a game to Ferris? And like we'll probably win the next two, but are we going to really have to take it to three? Or God forbid, are we going to get swept? Are we going to lose? Like whatever. And all of a sudden, yeah, I've driving home from Moorhead, and I just keep getting these buzzes. And I think I was on the phone to my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, that game I saw on social media is going to overtime." I was like, "What?" And then Bemidji State ended up winning. And on the show last week, and we talked about this with our other episode with Lucas as well. Last week was the importance of winning game one in a best of three series is so huge because it just puts all of the pressure on that other team. And Bemidji State came with, it was a roller coaster. It was emotional. They did not play, obviously the goalie stood on his head for Ferris. And obviously as a team, you could go, we did not play our best game, but at the end of the day, we got away with it. Now let's just go back tomorrow. And the next day, and that's the thing, they're up 1-0. They came away with the win. They could kind of take a breath and calm down. And you saw it. And for a team like Ferris, that's an 8 seed that just lost an emotional game where they gave up a big lead. And now then it's like you're one loss away from being done. And then it's like, all right, our season's over. And you could kind of see that in game two, Ian, and I'll let you kind of break down the specifics. But just from a tonal perspective, it felt like after Bemidji State got that win Friday night, Ferris State was like, all right, pack it up. We're done.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they had like an Evan Murr type of quit in them necessarily, but you could tell. I mean, for a
You took
team
all
as
the wind out of the sail, all the air out of
right,
the balloon.
exactly. They're 10-22 coming into this series. They know if they don't win, they're super big underdogs, and that's what they would have needed to get an emotional win on Friday night and to have it ripped away from them in the way that it was with 40 seconds left in regulation to give up that. It speaks to the Beavers of last year. We talked
Right.
about all those games the Beavers gave up those late goals, tying goals or winning goals in the last 2 minutes of games. It's deflating. It really is. And after a 10-22 season, you lose that game, you got to win 2 in a row, you're on the road. It's been a long season. They didn't they especially after the Beavers got the first goal. I said to myself, and I don't know if I actually made a comment on it, but the first goal in that second game was going to be massive. If the Beavers came out and scored a goal in the first period, I think that would have been all it took to late Ferris State. If you let them get out to another early lead again, they're going to get their mojo back. They're going to start playing, what Ferris State hockey, like they can do, like they're very frustrating. And for a long time, it was 0-0. It was 0-0 going into the second period until finally a beautiful little tip down to the ice, like to stop the puck from entering the zone. Adam Fleming, I don't even know what you call it, but he almost high stick the puck. They had to review it for it felt like 20 minutes. It was probably closer to 5, but it's like, dude, if it takes you that long to review the play, you clearly do not have indisputable evidence to overturn it. So the
Right.
call on the ice has to stand. But it was a beautiful play by Fleming, and then he passed it forward. Carter Jones on the wing, and just a snipe of a shot over the shoulder of Stein there to break the deadlock. And then it's 1-0, and it's still a little cagey because you're only up a goal, but you're still up. And then Eric Polkamp ends up putting 2 shots on the power play past Stein right there at the end of the period, one with about 4.5 minutes to go. And then they got another penalty, our power play, and Polkamp put one in with about a minute left in the period from basically the same spot. You could probably watch both replays and you'd be thinking, why are they showing this highlight twice? Like, it was the same spot on the ice, a quick little wrister or something like that, just and both both assists came from Kyle Loaf. Judding had one and Rode had another. And then in the third period, who else, man? That fourth line's got to get theirs. They got one, or Dante Lawson. He wasn't playing with the fourth line, obviously, because Kirkland Irie was out. So Lawson came up to the second line, and that's where he got his goal on Friday night. But then they all came back together, and Jake McLean got a goal assisted by Dante Lawson and Will Magnuson. So Fulmer did not come back. Irie did come back for Saturday, so we'll see with Fulmer if he is good to go. We're hoping so for Saturday's semifinal game. But, yeah, I mean, pretty dominant game from the Beavers. It did, after the first and second goal especially, like at the end of the second period there, you could kind of feel that Ferris State was not playing their most, how do you say, motivated hockey, I'll say.
Yeah, it just looked like a team that was ready to be done for the season. Not so much that they gave up, but it's like, you know what? Now is maybe the time you got to know when to quit while you're behind. And they weren't like I'm not even going to show up kind of game, but it was definitely a go through the motions and let's get to the 60-minute mark and let's be done.
Yeah, it felt a lot like the Beavers in the playoffs last year. And obviously, I'm always hoping that they win. I'm not in the mentality that I want them to lose so the season can just end. Obviously, I wanted them to beat Northern Michigan, but especially in that Saturday game against Northern Michigan, you're thinking like, God, we've been limping to the end of the season here. Like, you know, it just put us out of it. Just end it so we can regroup, figure out who's staying, who's going, and get that on. You know, that's kind of what it felt like a little bit. And I'm sure Ferris State was going through the same thing. But yeah, I mean, that's why you wanted to get them. You know, if you can get ahead and get the lead, that was the matchup to have. And BSU took advantage of it. Not a super fun weekend just in terms of, obviously, when you look back, yeah, it's a sweep. It's an exciting overtime victory, but I hate playing against Ferris State, man. Bob Daniels, you know, for every fault that Bob Daniels has, he gives Bemidji State fits when he plays against them. So it was excellent to come out of there with a sweep. You kind of avoid getting, you know, teased from other fan bases around the conference. Oh, man, look at the Beavers. They couldn't even sweep Ferris State. What are they worth? That's, you know, it felt good to not have anything to really watch for on Sunday, except for obviously who you were going to be playing. And I guess, I don't know, you got anything else to add against Ferris State unless you want to kind of jump into the rest of the quarterfinals?
One last thing before we jump in, we should note Bemidji State is jumped into the rankings after the weekend.
Oh, true. I think they just added another spot in there because technically we're tied with Arizona State for that 20th spot.
I'm leaving with something. I'm taking it.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fine. That ranking, especially at this point of the season, means almost nothing. Like, basically, what everybody's looking at is where you're at in pairwise and where you're.
Are you still playing?
Are you still playing? Yeah. So it's cool to see that the Beavers have had this super hot streak. I think the last 11 games, they have not lost. It's 10. It's 10 games instead, like 11 conference games, not counting that Augustana weekend. Man, I really just wish we would have swept Augustana so that we could just have a clean, like, we don't have to specify, conference games were unbeaten in 11. Like, no, we could just say, like, we're unbeaten in 13 if we would have just pulled out that Saturday night game in Augustana.
You can just say won 13 of our last 14. That also has got some weight to it, but it doesn't have like a streak mentality, which also.
But you also haven't won. So you'd have to say unbeaten in 12 of your last 14 because you had 2 ties in there and some overtime wins. And whatever. We're hot and we deserve to be ranked. And so good for the Beavers for climbing up there and being top 20 in the nation.
The nation. Yeah. So that's where Bemidji State stands. It's overall just a good series. I think from what I saw in the highlights, felt like, you know, obviously not packed, but some pretty good Sanford Center crowds were there as well. And overall, I mean, now that these games are moving down to single elimination, the crowd should be good as well because you're not having to sell tickets for both nights. It's one night, appointment viewing. Let's go. The game is going to be Saturday.
Spring break is over.
Spring break is over. That's also a big thing. The student section can be, I think the students had a pretty good showing for that Minnesota State series, but now there's no excuse for why it shouldn't be. And
Right.
the game's on Saturday night. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Saturday, 6:00 face off or 7:00?
7:07.
7:07 face off, Sanford Center. We'll let you know who they're playing as we run down the CCHA playoffs. Ian, let's jump into the upset of the week.
Yeah, there was one series that went to 3 games. That's and it was the Tommies and Lake Superior State series. So I think it's one that we kind of thought might go to 3 games, just because of how injured the Tommies are. They still didn't get anybody back. I think they were still skating 11 forwards. They had to go to 3 games, and Lake Superior State ended up winning with like 6 seconds left on the clock. It's just a crazy ending to that game, but especially after you lose Jared Westcott, who we'll touch on in a minute, was a first-team All-CCHA forward, got a major penalty in, I think, the second period of that game, or maybe late in the first, and to be able to not only come from behind, that was crazy. I mean, we saw something from the University of Minnesota against Penn State this weekend where they got like 3 penalties, including 1 major. They were playing 5-on-3, and yet they still killed off the penalty against Penn State. Lake State did something very similar where they were playing 5-on-3 for part of it, with the major to Westcott, and they ended up getting a shorty out of it. So they came up +1 out of all that whole debacle. St. Thomas had to be just gutted.
Well, we talk about that with Ferris, like the moments where it's just like, all right, it's time to be done. Like, we just can't go on like this. If you're the St. Thomas bench, there's no way you go, we can make a Mason Cup run.
Well, and they kind of did. They bounced back. I think they got another goal. I can't remember if they took the lead or if it, I think they took the lead, and Lake State had to eventually tie it back up and then take the lead, of course, with 6 seconds left. So it was a fun game. That was the only Sunday game that had to be played. So Lake Superior State did win in 3, just as Lucas and I predicted. Again, St. Thomas, pretty good season. I'm not going to lie. The injuries probably did derail a lot of what could have been successful. They probably would be right up where BSU is in the pairwise, and maybe had a chance. They probably would have had a decent chance to win the conference if not for some of those injuries. And it's a credit to them that they finished second, even in a down conference, and took Lake State to 3. So credit to them, but hopefully they can rebound and come out healthier next season. We know how that feels, but
right. Yeah. And especially because if St. Thomas stays healthy, I mean, they're challenging the Beavers for the McNaughton Cup at the end of the season. So, it's easy to poke at St. Thomas now while they're down and while their season ends. But, there could be a very Bemidji State-like turnaround for them next year where they stay healthy in late March, or they stay healthy in February and early March, and they end up coming away with the McNaughton Cup. There's a possibility that St. Thomas can do that. They have great infrastructure there. Their barn is going to come up. Was it 2025 or 26? It's not too far away from.
Yes, 25, 26. That season will be the first.
So they got one more season where they're playing at St. Thomas Academy's ice, and then they are going to their own barn. And once they get that, St. Thomas is in a good spot, and they're still on a playoff, ban. I don't even want to call it a ban, but just they're not allowed in to the NCAA tournament yet. So, for St. Thomas, winning the Mason Cup would have been great, or the McNaughton Cup for PR purposes and for the program trying to build it. But, in terms of everything, they're probably like, pack it up. We'll try again next year. And that program still, I mean, it's only like their 3rd year in the CCHA, and they're climbing their way towards the top. So they're a welcomed addition to the conference, and they're not going anywhere. But they had a good season overall. Congratulations to Lake State. And I hope you get pummeled.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll touch on that in just a second. But the other quarterfinals were Michigan Tech over Bowling Green. They swept them. Friday night, kind of what you've been seeing from Michigan Tech over Bowling Green lately. It was 5-0. And then Saturday night, it was a 6-5 absolute thriller, dude. Like, unbelievable game. And I'm upset that again, my internet was so terrible. To refrain from swearing. It was very bad. And so I couldn't watch more than just the one game without anything buffering. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to leave the Beaver game up and not watch anything else. And I'm upset because I wish I could have been able to watch that game as well. 6-5. I think Tech took the lead with like 1:08 left in the game over Bowling Green, and they held on to win. So, Bowling Green gets swept. They are done. Of course, a lot of drama there. And if you look at their season a month ago, they were kind of in a place where you thought, holy cow, they might win this conference. They had games against Michigan Tech and Northern Michigan. And of course, that was before Tech kind of got hot in that get right series against Bowling Green. But Bowling Green struggled to end the season. They finished in 6th. And of course, that comes at a price. And that price was a bit shocking to me. I know that there's some people out there, Bowling Green fans weren't necessarily quite as shocked, but Ty Eigner was let go by Bowling Green. So they are going to be in search of a new head coach for next season. I don't have a ton to say about it other than, I'm a little bit surprised if it was going to happen that it didn't just happen before the season started when all that crap went down with them.
Right.
It almost felt like maybe it was all right, this is a prove it year. All this shit happened before the season. And if you go out and have a successful year, maybe compete for either cup, we'll keep you on. But otherwise, we're going to move on from you. And neither of those things happened. So maybe that's what it was, but I truly don't know. But
it might just have been on. You're right. Like, there's a good chance that maybe even he went to like the AD's office and just said, look, let me go through the season. I think we still have a decent team, give me a shot. And they're like basically not wanting, because here, when you fire the guy, you just hire the interim. So it might just have been like, and this also is another thing. Does the athletic department want to pay a guy for an extra 6 months to not be on the job? Or is it, at least you get the sunken cost fallacy of at least he works for you for another 6 months or 3 months or what? I can't remember when that stuff all went down. But an extra 4 months, something like that before you fire him. Or it could just have been, maybe the school thought he could work through it. And then throughout the whole season, they went, you know what? It might just be better for this program to have a fresh start. And I can't blame them for thinking that at this point.
Yeah. Of course, it's all speculation. We're not in there and we don't know what happens, but yeah, that might be something to do with it. It happened literally like a week or two before the season. So maybe you're just saying like, well, all we would be doing is promoting the interim because there's no coaches on the market right now. So let's just try to ride it out. If things kind of righten themselves and everything is fine. And of course, we don't know what's going on internally. So, but yeah, Eigner was let go by Bowling Green, and Michigan Tech moves on to the semifinals. And of course, they'll host Minnesota State because they are now the second highest remaining seed.
While we're still in the Michigan State, Michigan Tech Bowling Green stuff, what's maybe there's not much really to say on the podcast. What's been going on with the Swankler situation here? Anybody want to fill me in?
Are you referring to his father?
Yeah,
on Twitter. Yeah, he's just parents are very passionate about
as they should be.
But there is, I think, a line that has to be drawn in the sand, and Austin is a character, that's for sure. And his dad does a job of sticking up for his son on social media whenever anything comes out about him. We'll leave it at that. The replies to that quote tweet
go off the rails a little bit.
Somebody said fat and weird family, and I'm like, what? Jesus Christ.
Why? Why?
What are we talking about here, man?
Oh my goodness. Geez. Yeah. No, the dad definitely has a right to stand up for his son, while at the same time, just because you feel like you need to say something maybe doesn't mean you need to say something in all those cases. And that kind of goes for everybody maybe in this situation. Anyways, it's all on X. Go find it for yourself. If you're very intrigued. And I just thought, so I didn't mean to go off on a whole thing on it. I just saw it. And since we were here, I was like, I've heard like whispers about it from like our group chats and stuff like that, but I have not asked about it yet. So that was,
no, that's basically what it is anytime something comes up about Austin Swankler on social media, his dad chimes in and adds a really preposterous statement. Like, he did claim that Austin Swankler will win the Hobie next year. So keep that in mind as well. It's just, it's a little bit over the top. It's kind of like a LeVar Ball situation where you're like, buddy,
you're not helping.
Reel it back. Yeah. Your son's already got a really bad public image, like maybe you're not helping as much as you think you are. But you know what? It's better that he's on his side rather than him
Right.
being on social media being like, my son's an idiot, like cancel
Right.
him. Like that would be a pretty bad look in itself. But yeah. Not to spend too
Anyway.
much time on Michigan Tech, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um
Anyway. All right. Yeah. Minnesota
Minnesota
State.
State did advance over Northern Michigan. And this is probably the series that I paid the least amount of attention to just because it was like not that close. And of course, I didn't have a ton of opportunity to watch other series this weekend, but yeah, it kind of seemed like Minnesota State just kind of handled them. They just dealt with them totally fine. It was 2-1 on Friday to Northern Michigan's credit, but it always just kind of felt like Minnesota State was going to pull it out. Never really felt like they were in any danger. And then 6-1, and that got really out of hand at the end. There was a empty net goal, and then there was just a kind of a fluky goal where it's like 20 seconds left in the game, and you can tell Northern Michigan's just out of it, and they throw the puck at the net and it goes in. But yeah, so Northern Michigan season will end again at the hands of the Minnesota State Mavericks. Not much to say about that series other than, yeah, I mean, Andre Gontus is finally done playing college hockey, I believe. I'm pretty sure he just used his 5th year of eligibility to come back.
I think you
So,
saying that statement gave him an extra year.
yeah, maybe. God, let's see. But yeah, so the semifinals are set. We've got Bemidji State taking on Lake Superior State because obviously it's reseeded. So Bemidji State gets the Lakers, who are the 7 seed, instead of the Mankato Mavericks, who would have been the 4 seed. So it's kind of a give and take because you go into that 2-7 matchup on Sunday and you're like, who do we want to win this game? Because if St. Thomas wins, obviously St. Thomas is still in the tournament. And in a winner-take-all game, they could certainly at home beat Michigan Tech, given a week's rest. That's not impossible. And then if we beat Mankato, we go to the tournament. We're going to the NCAA tournament. But if Lake Superior State wins, then you get to play the 7th seed. You don't have to play Mankato, who might be a little bit better than Lake State. Obviously, the standings were super close, and Lake State kind of owned you this year. But none of those games were played with Matthias Scholl in net. None of those games were played in 2024. So this is a completely different team that we're seeing here. I do think that the Beavers should pretty easily handle this matchup. I think you probably see something like a 4-1 game, maybe after an empty netter, maybe a 5-1 if Lake Superior State does pull their goalie down 3. It depends, but I think that it's a game that Lake Superior State could win. Absolutely. They're talented enough offensively, especially. And with Langenegger in net, you never know. He's a pretty good goaltender. He just doesn't get a lot of help all the time. But I think I did the math on it. BSU, since that Michigan Tech series, is averaging 3.8 goals per game, including the second game against Michigan Tech, not the first game where they only scored 1 goal. I cherry-picked that stat a little bit to help my agenda. But either way, 3.8 goals per game since that Michigan Tech series, including Augustana. 3.7 including Augustana. If you take out Augustana, it goes up to 3.8. So 3.7, 3.8. That's a pretty good offensive clip that the Beavers have been firing on. And Lake Superior State, they're not the greatest defensive team. Key to this weekend is just going to be play as much 5-on-5 hockey as you can. The Lakers have the best penalty kill in the CCHA, and they have the best power play in the CCHA. You saw that against Lake Superior or against St. Thomas when they take a 5-minute major and another penalty, and they got the shorty when it was 5-on-4. They didn't get that 5-on-3. I couldn't even imagine what the scenes would have looked like if they would have scored a shorthanded goal 5-on-3. But and they killed that whole. So yeah, I mean, play as much hockey as you can. 5-on-5. Yes. Jared Roboto did say the Beavers scored 5 goals with an extra attacker this weekend, which is technically true. The Dante Lawson one, I don't really count because they had kind of just taken the penalty. I don't even know if Scholl would have had time to get off the ice on the delayed penalty with how fast that kind of happened before Dante scored. So I technically don't know if they had an extra attacker on the net. And even if they did, it wouldn't have affected the play at all. So, but he's right. The power play did look better this weekend. Of course, it's Ferris State, and against Minnesota State, it didn't look very good. That was like the one thing we came out of that weekend saying needed to be a little better was maybe the power play. But yeah, I mean, stay 5-on-5. Don't take any silly penalties. You know, they're coming in, they've got nothing to lose, just like you do. I mean, technically speaking, Bemidji State's got nothing to lose either. I mean, they already won the McNaughton Cup. So if they go home, at least they have something to hang their hat on, other than, you know, it would stink a little bit to lose to a 7 seed, because the last time we met Lake Superior State was in 2021 in the semifinals. And you kind of thought we had a decent chance to move on and get an at-large bid to that, or not an at-large, but an automatic qualifying bid to that tournament. I think Northern Michigan beat Minnesota State in the first semifinal, and you're like, oh my gosh, Northern Michigan, if we get through Lake Superior State, we got Northern Michigan in the final. We can beat them. Like, we can go. We ended up going to the tournament anyways, but it was after a loss to Lake Superior State in the semifinal.
Did they go on to win the whole tournament that year?
They did, and they were in the same bracket that the Beavers were in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They played UMass in the first game and got blown out, I believe, just like
Shocker.
the Beavers did. But
turns out they blew a lot of people out that year.
Yeah, they ended up winning the national championship. So beating 3 Minnesota teams on their way to doing it.
God dang it.
Yeah, but either way, I think it'll be a good game. I think the Beavers should win it. If I had to pick, I'd pick them to win it, but that's the damn thing, man. It's one game, and anything can happen in a one-game series, and they're riding the high right now. They just upset St. Thomas. I don't know how much that extra day of rest will help. Obviously, there's, you know, you still have 5 days of full of rest in between it if you're Lake State. So that's probably enough recovery time anyways, to kind of recoup. But
well, it's not just the games either. It's the drive time. And we talked about that with Lucas last week too. I mean, maybe they fly, I don't know. But like, if you gotta go, if you gotta get on that bus and go all the way through Wisconsin and go back up to the UP and go do all that stuff, like, it's not gonna, like, they gotta go do that. So you have one less day to kind of add that travel. I'm not saying it's a lot. I'm not saying it's going to be the big difference, but it does matter a little bit in the grand scheme of things. Then you got to get back over to Bemidji on, well, I suppose because it's Saturday instead of Friday, but you know, it's just another thing to add. And yeah, how much does that extra game matter? Probably not a ton, just because it's one game, but also Bemidji State could just rest and they could spend an extra day. You know, obviously they didn't know who they were going to play, but you know, getting ready and doing all the things that they need to do, and they're home, so they don't have to take a day to travel, which gets them ready as well. Ian, just in terms of this matchup, what are the things that Bemidji State absolutely needs to do? What are your keys to victory?
Well, I before I touch on that, it is a damn near 10-hour drive from Bemidji to Sault Ste. Marie. So yeah, if they did end up going back, which I don't know why they would stay in Minnesota. I don't know if they could afford to put the team in a hotel all week. So I'm assuming they had to drive back from St. Paul to Sault Ste. Marie, and then they're going to have to drive back again. So that's a huge advantage that the Beavers have over them in that category. But I think the main thing is play clean hockey, stay out of the penalty box. Obviously, you can take power plays are encouraged, even though they're a good penalty killing team. You shouldn't just not take them. But 5-on-5 hockey is going to be just fine. If the longer you play 5-on-5, I think the better chance you have of winning this game. So that's the main one. And I think just get pucks to the net. You know, the Beavers have kind of started slow the last couple of weekends. They started slow against Minnesota State, but it didn't come back to bite them. Obviously, they didn't allow a goal in that short little run of time where you felt like, ooh, Mankato's kind of onto something for the first 3 to 4 minutes of that game. But the same thing against Ferris State. You just got kind of lucky that it was Ferris State and you could find a way to climb your way back into that game. Lake Superior State's had your number. Like I said, Enright's been in net for a couple of those. There's been some other injuries that have obviously been hampering the team. I don't believe Judding played in the series in Bemidji for sure. I don't remember if anybody else had been injured by that point. But even still, this is not the same team we saw then. So Yeah, get pucks in the net, and hopefully you can get a goal early and make them play from behind, because I think the Beavers are a very, very good team when they play from ahead.
How many goals did Lake State allow in that series against St. Thomas?
How many goals did they allow total in the 3 games? They allowed 1 the first night, they allowed 4 the second night, and 2, so 7 total goals.
In 3
So
games.
yeah,
Yeah.
a little over 2 goals a game, which is not terrible, but it's not anything
Well, and
terrific.
you got to remember they were playing St. Thomas, who, as we talked about, was injured to death, like in that one. So, yeah, again, it's like you talked about, get those shots up there and just keep putting the pressure on them. And that's the thing. Bemidji State has started slow in these games. And like you said, they were able to come back with it last week because it was Ferris. But that's the only, I mean, Bemidji State's the more talented team. They're the more accomplished team. They're the favorites. They should win this game. The thing that would scare me, because I think when Bemidji State gets ahead, even if it's not a huge lead, I think they're very good. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they've been very good as of late of just protecting those late leads. Like when they're up in a game, they're very, and that's just kind of the style of hockey that they play, but they're very, like they're very good at protecting the lead. When they get down, it's very sketchy, as it is with any team in college hockey. And that first period is going to be huge. You don't have to score a goal, but for the love of God, don't give up a goal in the first period. That maybe is just the key to victory. And that's not even on Scholl so much as it's just on, the team of just don't give up a goal in the first period. You can head into that locker room for the first time with the 0-0, because then you can kind of pick yourselves up after that. But a slow start could be brutal, especially because it's a 1-game playoff. Anything can happen. And all it takes is one night where a goalie for either team stands on their head and you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, I think that was a big common denominator earlier this season when Enright was playing a lot. Was Sartori would preach, we got to start quicker, because we get out to these, as Lake State, we got out to a terrible start, both games in Sault Ste. Marie, and we only were able to manage 1 point out of that first game by forging a comeback. And I think the Beavers are pretty good either way. They do play it well with a lead. And obviously they've shown that they can come back. They did it against Lake Superior State,
right,
and got a point out of that game. They did it to Michigan Tech this year. They did it to obviously Mankato.
Man, those comebacks feel like forever ago, don't they?
I know, and they did it to just Ferris State this last weekend. So I think either way you swing it, the Beavers have a decent chance to win the game. But obviously, the Beavers are a scorching hot second period team. I mean, the second periods was really the best period against Mankato. Probably both games the best period for Bemidji against Ferris State. Even though obviously you came back and tied the game in the third period against Ferris State, that first game. Yeah, I think they're a really good second period team. So if you can get into that second period 0-0, 1-0, you're up a goal, I think it's you're in a really good chance to win. So yeah, and of course you're at home, and that's why we wanted this 1 seed. No matter what happens, the next game and hopefully 2 games will be in the Sanford Center. So of course, get out to those games. And I guess, do you want to touch quickly on maybe Michigan Tech, Minnesota State? I don't need to break it down, but
which team? I think it basically comes down to this: which team would you rather win that game? Because do you want Mankato coming back up with their chance, like at revenge? Do you think maybe still that the Mavs aren't as talented as Tech, and that maybe you still would rather have that matchup with Mankato? I weirdly feel like I'm pulling for Tech, and I mean, I'm pulling for Tech just because I don't want Mankato to get there at all, but I feel like I'd rather play Tech than Mankato just because of maybe its previous ghosts. And that's maybe my thought process in that.
See, I'm seeing those ghosts myself. I am. And that's why I'd be nervous to play Mankato a little bit. Because you did just embarrass them. I mean, you pounded them, and they're going to want revenge for that. So they're going to come out and they're going to be playing
and
a
it's
lot
a 1
harder.
game.
And it's 1 game. So if they get off to that good start and they play like the team that they probably can be, then there's that. But I think that this Beaver team can handle Mankato pretty easily. I think I'd rather play Mankato than Michigan Tech right now. Michigan Tech's kind of coming into their own. They're playing a little bit better.
Fair.
But I also don't know if I want to give them too much credit, because it's been 4 wins against Bowling Green in the last 3 weeks and 1 win against an injured St. Thomas team in Houghton. How much credit do you really want to give Tech? I don't know. I feel like I'd rather face Tech because then there's no chance Mankato gets back to the tournament. I'd
Right.
rather see Michigan Tech go if it's not going to be us. But I feel like I'd rather play the Mavericks if I'm truly hoping for a little bit better of a matchup. And then the goaltending, especially, Tracy played really well actually this weekend against Northern Michigan. I think they went back to him, and I think a lot of Mankato fans thought it was the right call. He played pretty well, but at the same time, Pietola is very, very scary in a one-game winner-take-all scenario, and I think I'd rather be paired up with Minnesota State. I'm just now realizing Minnesota State is spelled with two I's in the semifinal round. So hopefully somebody from the CCHA hears this and will fix our problem ASAP.
Don Lucia, if you're listening to this podcast right now, stop what you're doing.
Fix this, please. But yeah, I think I would pick Michigan Tech. I think they're a better team. I think they're going to win. They're at home. And I think I'd rather play them just because I don't want to see Mankato succeed. So we'll go with that.
That's fair. Yeah, I think we can get on board with that. First team and second team, all those all CCHA awards were listed off. Beavers taking home some hardware. Let's get into that.
Yeah, so there will be more that comes out. They kind of spread them out over the week, and then even the next couple coming weeks, we'll have a couple awards drop still, like Coach of the Year. But yeah, the all CCHA teams were released yesterday. The freshman team, Eric Polkamp, was a honoree of that. He was one of the two defensemen alongside Evan Murr. Cole Moore, of course, the goaltender. There's not too many freshman options for goaltender usually, so Cole Moore, easily the best one there. And then the forwards, Luigi Benincasa from Ferris State, Isaac Gordon from Michigan Tech, and John Harrington from Lake Superior State. And then you get to the second team, which was announced 2 hours after that, and you got a little nervous because Isaac Gordon was up there, Connor Milburn, forward for Lake Superior State, and then Lucas Whalen made it, which was a little bit surprising to me. As a second teamer, Evan Murr and Josh Singer were the defensemen, and Blake Pietola was the second team goaltender. So no Scholl, no Leighton Road, no Polkamp. You're kind of like, ooh, man, are we going to get like Kyle Loft, and is Road going to get snubbed? Like Lucas Whalen was a little bit surprising to me because now you got Sam Morton that maybe is going to be Lucas Sauter. And Lucas Sauter was the one that ended up getting snubbed from Minnesota State. The Beavers had 4 players on the All-CCHA first team. Sam Morton and Jared Westcott joined Leighton Road as the forwards. Westcott, of course, from Lake Superior State, Morton from Minnesota State. And then the backside was all Beavers. Kyle Loft, Eric Polkamp, and Matthias Scholl, all CCHA first team. So congrats to the boys. I mean, that's a hell of a pull. And I mean, Road kind of struggled towards the end of the year, but I think he still deserved it.
Right. You can't let that recency bias
I'm a little bit surprised that Polkamp was the first team defenseman, but I'm also not. Like, he's been great at the same time. Scholl, and the goaltender one was the real one that was going to be up in the air. Are they going to give it to Cybele? Are they going to give it to Cole Moore? I think he struggled a bit towards the end of the year, so that kind of took him out of the running. But is it going to be Cybele? Is it going to be Pietola? Is it going to be Scholl? We didn't really know. So seeing Matthias get first team was really cool. And then this morning they released finalists for 3 awards, which seems a little silly. I don't hate that they do the finalists because I think it was Perry Lascaris said it's something they can add to their resume. It's cool. They can say they were a finalist for Defenseman of the Year or something. Right. But I think they need to do this maybe like before they announce the all CCHA teams, but then you'd kind of spoil who's on, because okay, Defenseman of the Year, it's between Kyle Loft, Evan Murr, and Eric Polkamp. I'm surprised that the finalists were the 2 people on the first team and then 1 person on the second team that was also on the rookie team. Right. So that one's probably going to go to Kyle Loft. I think those are announced on Friday, but expect Kyle Loft to be the Defenseman of the Year. Goaltender of the Year is the interesting one, but again, how do you give Scholl first team all conference and then not call him goaltender of the year? I think that would be a bit weird.
Right. Isn't that because aren't those kind of the same thing in that?
That's what
that
it feels
breath?
like. But
Or
the
is it a way for
finalists
you to
are
kind of split the baby and be like, well, he's first team, but he's goaltender of the year?
right.
And like,
Scholl's going to be first team, Pietala's second team, and we're going to give Seibel, who's also a finalist, goaltender of the year. Like, it would be a little bit weird to see that happen. But yeah, so that was, I guess, the one to keep an eye on. And then, shocker, the three finalists for forward of the year were Sam Morton, Leighton Road, and Jared Westcott, who were the three first team
whoa.
forwards. Who would have thought? And I'm expecting that one to go to Sam Morton. I think he's got I don't think it takes into account anything outside of conference or in the playoffs, but he's got like 24 goals now on the season. And a lot of those have come in conference games. So he's probably going to get forward of the year, which is totally deserved. And then there will be some more awards announced, like defensive defenseman of the year, which I think the coaches are voting on really weird. Cause like you would think a guy from BSU that would have deserved that award would be maybe Tony Fulmer or Will Magnuson. But no, I think it's basically between Kyle Loft and like Eric Polkamp or something like that. And it's like, okay, these are really offensive minded, like defensemen this year. And of course, they've been good on defense too, but it's like it's supposed to be defensive defensemen. Like, why are we even voting on this award if you're going to vote on it like this? But hey,
Right.
so those will come up. I think tomorrow there's something on Thursday that gets announced, and then there's something else on Friday, and then there's more next week. So we'll touch on all that next week when we're back with you. Yeah, that's the gist of it though for the awards.
A very hockey filled broadcast. It's fun and they deserve the talk because of just how well things have gone for Bemidji State as of late. But now let's kind of dip our toe into the spring sports over the week. Bemidji State, of course, had that game with Augustana, and it went about as well as playing Augustana this time of year goes for them. They lost. They scored 2 combined runs in those 4 games and gave up a lot more on the other end. So currently Bemidji State 1-17 on the season. We kind of knew that this was going to be the year for them. We knew it was just, again, another kind of rebuilding year for that baseball team. They will play over the weekend. They have a 4-game set in Winona against Winona State. And that's kind of looking like their schedule, just the games on the weekends. Of course, the one nice thing for the baseball team is the fact that all these weekend series can be played on the weekend instead of having to get them moved up to where you're playing games like 4 out of the 7 days of the week and like 2 are travel days. So like you really only get 2 days where you're not, where you can actually like do your schoolwork or do whatever. And so stuff like that helps out. First home game for Bemidji State is on the 29th of March, and that one in Bemidji, and hopefully they can play that. It's a doubleheader against Southwest Minnesota State. But that's where things sit with the baseball team. Ian, where do things sit with softball?
Softball played some games over the last week or so, and they didn't necessarily go as great as they would have liked. They won a couple games against College of Staten Island and Goldie Beacom. We might have touched on those because that was Monday early. But Mercyhurst, Southern New Hampshire, Trevecca Nazarene, Quincy University lost all 4 of those games to end their Florida trip, and they fall to 6-11 still on the year. Now they go to Missouri to play some games before they jump into NSIC play. They have 6 games, yes, 2 against each of Central Missouri, Missouri Western State, and Northwest Missouri State. Again, before they come back next weekend to start their NSIC play in Marshall. So, yeah.
We always talk about those non-conference losses. It's so hard to read. And they 2 of those games went to extra innings. One game went to 8 innings. Another game went to 9. So like there's a little bit of like hey, they lost those games where they were close. They lost another one 3-1. The one against Southern New Hampshire, they got 10 run. They lost in 6. Or they didn't get 10 run because it was 11-3. I think it's the 7 run rule. I can't remember how that works,
something
but
like that, yeah.
Something like that. They got mercy ruled in that one. But other than that, their 3 out of 4 were competitive ball games. It's a moral victory in that. And like you talked about, got to go through Missouri before they can come back and finish those games up north. Ian, any other Bemidji State news and notes with the spring sports that we need to touch on?
Yeah, men's and women's golf got their spring seasons underway this last couple of weeks here. Women's golf, not quite as successful. The SMSU Spring Invitational, they finished 11th of 12th and 10th of 12th. And then later last week, they had the SMSU Spring Challenge. Both of these were in Litchfield Park, Arizona, and they finished 12th out of 12th on both days in that. And then you bounce over to the men's. They played in Phoenix, Arizona in the Maverick Spring Invite. And they got 5th out of 11, and then they tied for 3rd out of 11 overall in the invite, I guess. So men's golf kind of picking up where they left off with a little bit of a successful run there early season. And yeah, we'll see. We'll keep monitoring them as the season goes along. Hopefully they can make the NCAAs again.
You know what's one thing, speaking of women's golf, you know what's kind of a fact about the team that I'm kind of embarrassed that I realized, that not like this week, I realized it like a couple months ago. The head coach for Bemidji State women's golf is Erica Gartner. And she was on the women's basketball team while we were on campus. We would talk, like she was on the bench. She started a little bit on games that we covered back on the radio show for R&B Sports Talk. She was an assistant coach a little bit on the basketball team. She was named the interim head coach in March of 2022. And I think she's pretty much just been filling that role since. So obviously all of last season, I didn't fully understand her. Like maybe I saw the name and I didn't just quite put 2 and 2 together, but congratulations.
Really weird because I had been seeing her name pop up, on X or Twitter or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I remember her. I couldn't quite put my finger on why the name sounded so familiar. So that's interesting. I guess I didn't know that either.
Yeah. And, for that, obviously, still in a great relationship with people to be able to stick around and to be able to be on a coaching staff. And then also because I think she played golf. I can't remember off the top of my head if she was there or whatever, but no, it's always kind of cool when you can get somebody to stay back and be a part of the university like that. That's really, that's something that's really cool. Anyways, that's just an interesting fact because we would talk about her and the whole team around that time. With their games for women's basketball. We had the radio show in Bemidji when we were in college called for those who don't know, called R&B Sports Talk. And that's kind of where Beaver Banter began. It was just like our first segment of the show. And then we would kind of just talk about a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway, yeah, no, I just thought that was cool. So I thought that'd just be a cool, fun little thing to end the podcast on. Except
there we go.
There's one last thing.
More. Yep.
But wait, there's more. Ian, Gunner Olszewski's NFL dream continues. I'm counting the seasons, and this will be season 6 for him? Season 5?
6? Yeah, I think 6 sounds
19,
about
20,
right.
21, 22, 23. He's had 5 full seasons in the NFL. He'll be entering year 6.
Yep.
Roll Beavs.
Roll Beavs. Yeah, he got a 1-year extension to stay with the New York Giants, so good for him. Good for him that he's sticking around. I know he had a tough season last year, got cut from Pittsburgh, bounced around.
He did not do well with the Yinzers. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And then he came back and had I believe a punt return touchdown for the Giants.
He was very good with the Giants. Yeah. He had a punt return touchdown.
Yep. So
now they had DeVito as their quarterback, so it didn't really matter, but with the way the Giants wide receiving core looks, Gunner might, need to be like wide receiver 2 at this point. It's pretty rough for them. But
never know.
Here's the thing about Gunner he was a good defensive back at Bemidji State. He was he made a couple nice plays as a wide receiver in the NFL, but overall what Gunner's bread and butter was in college and what it is in the NFL was punt returning. And I would always remember, I'll tell the story. I would always remember the baseball players because I would take stats for the football team. The baseball guys would do like the clock and, a couple other things during football games, and Gunner played baseball as well as football, so they knew him pretty well. And they'd always talk about him fair catching, and they go, he never fair catches. He never fair caught a ball in college. I think maybe he had one in his entire college career. He never fair caught the football. She goes to show you what I'm going to call toughness. And really, that's the thing you can make a long career in the NFL just being a punt returner because it's so tough. It sounds really easy, but it is not. It's not. It's very difficult. That's why Marcus Sherrills for the Vikings, who was an awful corner, had a decade-long career in the NFL because he could return punts. And Gunner's over half. Exactly. Devin Hester's in the Hall of Fame just because he can return punts. And that's
bullshit, by the way.
I like how you said you weren't going to swear earlier in the podcast, and then you do
And
it like twice.
now I just got reminded that Devin Hester kept freaking Antonio Gates out of the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I'm all for Devin Hester being in the Hall of Fame, but not if it means that Antonio Gates is not a first ballot.
Devin
Come
Hester's
on,
in the
man.
Hall of Fame over Antonio Gates and Jared Allen. I don't get it.
What are we
Whatever.
doing,
That's
man?
that's a conversation for its own time. But the
Yep.
point is, you can have a long career as a punt returner, and Gunner's over halfway to having an NFL career. And if it all ended after this season for Gunner, 7 years in the NFL is an incredibly long career.
Longer than average.
The average career is like a season, 2.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends, but yeah, it's not that long. It's like, yeah, maybe 2 years.
Exactly. It's like, now obviously it's on average for the guys who can't make it through a training camp versus the guys who are in the league for 15 years. But still, I think if you had like the median maybe, or I don't know how that works.
Undrafted guy coming from a D2 college, what more can you really ask for than even a couple long year NFL career,
Right.
Catching passes from Tom Brady to returning punts, touchdowns,
Catching
still
passes
being in the
from
league,
Tom
yeah.
Brady to Cam Newton to it's
who the hell? Daniel
catching
Jones coming back.
catching passes from Kenny Pickett, like it's Mason Rudolph.
Can't be better than that, man.
Can't be better than. Although I wonder how many actually passes he catches. I wonder, or if it's just like, you're a great punt returner. Let's just have you focus on that. I don't know how that works, or if they do just in case like an emergency situation, but whatever. Congrats to Gunner. We'll forever stake our claim that we had classes with him, even though he has no idea what we look like or who we are. We'll be like, hey, it's my classmate. And he'll go, who? Like that.
Who?
If we ever met him in real life. But anyways, we're just really cool for Gunner, really awesome. And we're going to stake our claim that we had classes with Gunner Olszewski and Stanley Cup champion Zach Whitecloud. So we will die on these hills, Ian. We'll die on these hills. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. We'll check you guys next time, where we hopefully will be talking about Bemidji State in the main